So I just watched Todd Haynes's Carol, and I quite enjoyed it. I didn't like it as much as I love Far From Heaven. I think I don't know. I This movie was very hyped. Like literally everybody loves this movie, and there's been a lot of talk about how great this movie is, and for since Cannes, and so I maybe went in with really high expectations. And maybe it's because I watched a screener and I didn't watch it on the big screen. And as I do know in watching, I watched A Place in the Sun on TCM once, and I was like, eh. And then I saw it on the big screen, and I was like, oh my god, it's the best movie ever. So perhaps this is the fault of watching it in a cold apartment instead of a movie theater. That said, watch Far From Heaven. It's fucking fantastic. But this is a beautiful film. Todd Haynes is a great director. The thing that I think is so wonderful about this film is that it's all in these little gestures and little touches and looks and things that are so loaded with emotion and feeling and intent. And it's wonderful to get across so much by doing so little. That kind of cinema is sort of a lost art, which is something Haynes is really good at doing. He's clearly seen his fair share of 50s. So, and obviously for this one, so with Far From Heaven, his main inspiration was Cirque, and it's very Circean. In this one, he was more inspired by Brief Encounter, and you can definitely see the shades of Brief Encounter in this film, and for sure feel it in the tone of the film. Except that instead of a clandestine affair between a housewife and a man she meets in a train station, it is about a girl who is probably in her 20s and working at a department store, and she's a photographer, and she doesn't quite fit, but she doesn't know why, and she has a boyfriend, but she doesn't really want to go off with him, and she doesn't really know why. And then one day during Christmas, she sees Carol, played by and that's Rooney Mara. Carol, played by Cate Blanchett, and Cate Blanchett's character sees her, and there's that immediate like coup de foudre, as they say, and the rest is history as they fall for each other. But at the same time, this is 1951. I think it's 1951. I know on the internet it says 1952, but I literally just watched this movie, and I'm pretty sure it was like, as 1951 ends and we go into 1952 during the New Year's Eve scene. So I think the internet's wrong. But I just shut my other computer that had the DVD player, so I can't confirm. But anyways, it's the early 50s. And so, obviously, they can't be lesbians. They can't really be out. So this causes problems. But also, no one really talks about lesbians, and the Therese character has no idea what it is to be a lesbian, what these feelings are, if it's all right. And so she has a lot of learning to do about herself and her place in life, and it really shows that there's that outsider feeling of 1950s queer culture. And then you have a handful of like clearly out lesbians, floating around in New York, and she sees them, and they see her, and they can recognize their baby lesbian, but she hasn't really quite figured it out for herself yet. And that's kind of what the movie, like the underlying thing about the movie, is that it's Therese trying to come to terms with who she is, and in a world that doesn't want her to. It's also got a lot to do with, there's all these really great moments of just how like everyday misogyny just pops up. At one point, the Cate Blanchett character, she's going through a pretty nasty divorce with her husband, and at one point he says, so-and-so's wife says drop by, and she's like, Jeanette, because she basically insists he call this woman by her name and not by her relation to the man she's married to. And it's just little things like that where, you know, in the history of this country in particular, and I'm not sure elsewhere, but I know in America, people are Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so, and lots of times, especially mid-century America, you would be known as, you know, Mrs. Burt Lancaster. I can't think of a name right now. Burt Lancaster always comes into my head. Rather than, you know, Carol Lancaster or whatever your actual name is. And there's a lot to unpack in terms of how we name ourselves after we get married. That is maybe not for this discussion, but I have a lot of opinions. If you want to ping me on Twitter about my opinions of changing your name when you get married. There's a bunch of other little things that of basically ways of discussing sort of the harmful ways in which misogyny comes into our everyday life. And often in ways that both the men and women they don't realize what's happening, but it's there. So this was a great film. This film was in development hell for over a decade before it got made. So we're just lucky we have. What is my camera doing? We're just lucky we have it, you know. And it was adapted by a friend of Patricia Highsmith, so she kept the spirit of her friend's novel. Although, according to the Wikipedia, several things were changed. I look forward to reading it. One last note, part of what makes this so groundbreaking in terms of it as a novel and now as an adaptation is that for so long, particularly with lesbian novels and lesbian cinema, it's unhappy. There's an unhappy ending. They have to part. There's death, something, you know? And one of the first films to have a relatively happy ending for lesbians was Desert Hearts. It's from 1985 or 86. That's written and directed by a woman, mind you. So having a story that has, spoiler alert, a relatively happy ending is revolutionary. We get that now more, but in the mid-century, that was not. Lesbians were not allowed to have happy endings in mainstream culture. So it's always wonderful to see that sort of happen. This is a cold movie. It's very, like, there's snow all the time, and I'm really cold right now, so I'm like, it made me colder while I was watching it. Again, it's also a performance where Cate Blanchett's performance is the one that's being sort of lauded the most right now because it's the most showy. But Rooney Mara did win Best Actress at the Cannes Film Festival. She tied with Emmanuelle Berco, and her performance is the understated one because most of her journey is an internal journey, and it's all through these looks that Therese gives, and it's all in Rooney Mara's eyes and in the way she holds herself, and that transformation is very subtle and probably why it's going to be more overlooked than Blanchett's performance because she has the showier role, which is a bummer, but that's sort of how it works here in Hollywood. This is, I think, just went wide or is about to go wide soon. So, or I don't even know if it's going wide, to be honest. I'm lying. I don't remember. I feel like I saw that it was going wide this week, but maybe it's next week. But you should go see it. It's fantastic. Oh, also, I forgot to, I was too busy talking about women, you know. The husband is played by Kyle Chandler, and he is fantastic. And the boyfriend is played by Jake Lacy, who you will remember from Obvious Child. He's also very good, and I look forward to his blossoming career. And then we also have a little bit with Sarah Paulson, who is always solid. So this is a great cast, great screenplay, beautifully made film. You should definitely check it out. it is worth your time.